Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Representing YL Radio, I'm Johnny Kay. Alongside, lovely and gracious Miss Deb Sutton from the Rocket Miner. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Johnny. Glad to be here again.
Glad to see you once again as well. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sweetwater County Library in Green River, as we've got another edition of the Candidate Forum and Debate. This evening, we'll be visiting with the candidates vying for the job of County Coroner. Republican contender, J.R. Alexander, and your Democrat nominee, Dale Majhanovich. We'll go over some of the rules very briefly. Each candidate will get a 3-minute opening statement. We'll have questions from our panelist, Deb Sutton. Each candidate will then get 90 seconds to answer. Then each candidate will have 45 seconds to respond to the other candidate's answer. Now, we should have time, ample time, that is, for audience questions. And by the way, if you have questions at any point during this debate, feel free to write them down. We've got pens and paper in the back. And raise your hand if you have any questions, or if you'd like to submit those questions as well. We'll field those and give you the opportunity to read those questions towards the end of our debate. Are there any questions at this time of me? Very good. For the opening statements, let's begin with our Republican nominee, J.R. Alexander. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Johnny. It's a privilege to be here tonight. I'd like to say that, I'd like to begin by saying that I have a lot of respect for my opponent. He's been in the office for several years now, and he's done a good job here in the county. But I feel it is time for a new perspective. It's a fresh focus. I have the abilities and the skills to fill the coroner's office. I have many ideas that can improve the coroner's office. The position of coroner is a requirement of logical thinking to take step-by-step processes. It also requires good reasoning to be able to evaluate the different types and causes of death. Medical knowledge is not a requirement for the coroner's office, although it can be very helpful. I've served 2 years as a CNA, working for the Young at Heart Senior Center in Rock Springs. I had the opportunity to help and to serve many people and to deal with families at the time of death as well. According to the Wyoming state statutes, the only actual requirement of the coroner is that they must complete a class, which is a basic coroner class, within 1 year after being elected. This goes to say that there are not a lot of requirements that are stated or are necessary to be a coroner. However, there are certain traits and attributes and abilities and skills that can help a coroner to be a successful candidate. I studied health sciences at Western Wyoming University, or college, sorry, not a university yet. And I obtained my associate's degree there. I've also volunteered over the past few years at Fox Funeral Home. Although I was not able to do too much because without being a licensed embalmer, there's only so much that you can legally do. However, I learned a lot from Spencer Fox's wealth of knowledge regarding types of death and cause of death, and I would stop by as often as I could to learn from him. Some of my ideas for the coroner's office, as I said, would improve the coroner's office, improve the county, improve the people, or it'd be beneficial to the people going through such a traumatic experience as the loss of a loved one. I commit to doing this. I have the abilities to do it, and I will succeed as the next Sweetwater County coroner. Thank you.
Thank you, and that is your Republican nominee, J.R. Alexander. Now we'll have the opening statement from your incumbent, Democrat Dale Majhanovich.
Thanks, Johnny. Good evening. I'm Dale Majhanovich, and I'm running for re-election as your Sweetwater County coroner. I'd like to start off by thanking Lindsay and the library system for organizing this forum on such short notice, and thanking all of you as well for being here tonight. The issue in this year's coroner's race go beyond qualifications and experience. They extend to the question of qualifications and experience earned and applied within our community right here in Sweetwater County. I've served with the Sweetwater County Coroner's Office for 32 years, 21 years as coroner. I have 34 years of experience as a licensed funeral director and embalmer, and 25 years of service as a licensed EMT. And all of it has been right here in Sweetwater County, where I was born and raised. A good coroner is not only well-versed in a wide range of professional skills vital to death investigations, but must work closely and effectively with law enforcement, federal, state, and local, medical service professionals and institutions, healthcare providers, pathologists, toxicologists, emergency service providers, forensic laboratories, and others. I've worked with these agencies, departments, groups, and individuals successfully and efficiently on a daily basis for over 3 decades. Like any other elected official in running for re-election, I am reapplying for my job, and it is you, the voters of Sweetwater County, who will decide whether or not to rehire me. I ask you to look closely at my record of service or my resume. In my 32 years with the Coroner's Office, I've worked hard to maintain the highest standards of integrity, professionalism, and commitment to the people of Sweetwater County. If I am reelected, the Office of Sweetwater County will continue to be operated in a professional, dignified, fair, and impartial manner. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes the opening statement of our incumbent, Dale Majhanovich. Deb Sutton, let me turn things over to you for some opening questions.
Thanks, Johnny. This first one, it may sound like you've answered this already, but let me ask this in a different way. Can you explain the most important duties of the county coroner and how your specific education, work history have prepared you for this position? Dale, this first of all, it goes to you.
All right. Basically, the coroner's duties are basically set up by statute and also governed by the Wyoming Coroner's Board of Standard. His most important duties are, he is basically the chief death investigator of the county. He investigates any deaths that are not anticipated, and that include any deaths of violent or criminal action, apparent suicides, accidents, apparent drug or chemical overdoses, child abuse, where the cause is unknown, a public health hazard is present, or when the identity of the victim is unknown and the body is unclaimed. His duties are also, upon investigation, determine the date, time, cause, and manner of death of these individuals. And then after this is complete, he will certify the death.
Very good, and same question to J.R. Alexander, please.
I would have to agree that of what Dale has said regarding the duties of the coroner's office. One thing he did not cover is, which was part of the question, was his experience in education regarding those issues. So I will add to that, that in past education and experience, I have had positions that have required me to manage not only people, but office, to manage different companies, to be thorough and have an eye for detail, to be sure that finished products were taken care of. This eye for detail and the ability for reasoning is what is important in the coroner's office. I've had my education at Western Wyoming, as I stated. The important aspects of the coroner's office I have seen and I have learned from different coroners around the state. I've traveled around the state, I've met with different coroners, I have spoken with them for long periods of time on the phone. And I have learned there are some that are they're strictly administrative, that's all they do, those coroners. But there are others who are more involved. My plan is to be more involved, to take greater participation in investigating deaths.
All right, thank you, sir. And Dale Majhanovich, an opportunity to rebut that if you so choose.
Sure, I didn't realize you asked about the education part. I've actually been involved in this line of work for, probably 41, 42 years. I started out as a young lad working with Pete and Mike Vase and that actually did involve coroner investigation. Of course, P-Base at the time was the coroner, and Dave Jellica, his deputy. I have continued doing that for a lifetime. I have 32 years experience with the county coroner's office, like say 21 years as your acting coroner. As far as the administrative portion that he brought up, I'm in complete disagreement with that. The coroner is, like I say, the chief investigator of the county. If you become administrative, you have your deputies do your work for you, and by statute, the only time a deputy responds or handles a coroner's case is if the coroner is absent or is unavailable to act.
All right, thank you. And closing thoughts on that first series of questions, J.R. Alexander.
My comment about it being an administrative position, there are administrative requirements. There is a great deal of paperwork that has to be done and filed. There are some coroners that I referred to around the state, a couple of them, that's all they do, yes, and they assign most of the investigative work to their deputy coroners. But I did say that this is not my plan. My plan is to be involved, and my plan is to be an investigator. Much of the experience that Dale has required before he became coroner is valid, and I admit that. I understand that. But it's time for a new perspective and new ideas. It's very easy to become complacent while in office for many years. And I provide a new focus, new energy for this office.
All right, very good, sir. This next series of questions first, and with those questions, once again, Deb Sutton.
JR, knowing that it depends on the type of scene, as the coroner, what is the first priority at the scene of an unattended death?
At the scene of an unattended death, there are two different things that go on. One is an investigation of a coroner. The other is an investigation from the police or the sheriff's department, depending on the case. The coroner is in charge of the body. The law enforcement agency is in charge of the scene. Okay, so the first thing that needs to happen is that the coroner and the law enforcement agency need to get together and have a brief meeting before even entering the scene, and to talk about responsibilities, duties, and who is going to do what. The police should not go in first and call the coroner later, which happens many times now. But the coroner should be there from the very get-go, from the beginning, to meet with the police, the law enforcement, to review what's going to be happening in the scene. If there is if it does not involve the police, for example, if it is an unfortunate death at somebody's home where the police are not involved, then there is an outline to be followed where the coroner obtains information, does a walk around of the complete area. The coroner works from outside in, taking pictures, photographs, writing down every detail from outside in. These are the processes.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir. And that same question to Dale Majhanovich, once again, as coroner. What is the first priority at the scene of an unattended death, knowing that it depends on the type of scene?
Well, of course, first priority on any scene we arrive at is priority number one is scene safety. You got to make sure the scene is safe. There are no perpetrators around, because prior to getting, a lot of times you don't know what you have until you got there. Then, of course, keeping the scene secure. Usually that is done prior to arrival by law enforcement, but not always. Sometimes, because not everything follows the book. Sometimes the coroner's office is notified prior to law enforcement. So it is my obligation to notify law enforcement, and then we meet hand in hand. When we arrive at the scene, of course, like he says, once it's secure, we do go in there hand in hand together and work together as a unit. Because the body is a part of the scene, and the scene, the body does include, or is included in the scene. So we work hand in hand. Also, at times, you might have to differentiate from your investigation because family members may be there. And at that time, the coroner does become an advocate for the family to calm them down, explain what needs to go on, and to make sure they are basically can leave the scene safely.
Very good. That's Dale Majhanovich, and J.R. Alexander will have the opportunity to rebut that.
I've spoken with different deputies here, or not here in Green River, but in Rock Springs, and I have gathered some information regarding this issue, and that is that on several occasions, the call has been made to Dale, and Dale has stated that the police can go ahead and do their investigation, do their work, and then when they're ready for Dale to come in to get the body, they can do that. I do not believe that deputies of the Rock Springs Police Department have lied to me regarding that issue. The coroner should always be there at the very beginning to meet with the police. And that does have to, that's what I'm talking about regarding the scene safety, as Dale mentioned.
All right, thank you, sir. And closing thoughts on that series of questions, Dale Majhanovich.
Well, as far as that's concerned, to my recollection, that it's never happened. The only time that has ever happened is if the coroner does get the call, we call the police department, we arrive there, and come to find out upon arrival, it ends up being a hospice case, which is not in the jurisdiction of the coroner's office or whatnot. That's the only time in my recollection I ever remember that happening.
All right, thank you, sir. That concludes that series of questions. Dale Majhanovich, you will answer this next series of questions first, and with the next series of questions, once again, Deb Sutton.
Would you be prepared to handle a mass casualty incident? If so, what does your plan involve?
Mass casualty incidents they're extremely difficult for anybody to handle, especially the coroner. So a lot of the responsibility is put on his shoulders. I've been actively involved with East Water County disaster response operations for over 3 decades. So I understand that I am highly trained in what goes on there. I am also a member of DMORT, which is the Disaster Mortuary Operation Response Team. It's the national team. We have, I believe there are 9 regions in the United States. Only 3 people in the state of Wyoming are on the team. I got on the DMOR team after 9/11, reasoning being this problem of terrorism and mass casualties. I thought it was important. It also gives me a chance to be involved. I've been to several trainings over the country dealing with mass casualty or mass disaster situations. What exactly is a mass casualty or a mass fatality situation? That's basically when the fatalities of the certain scene you're dealing with overbound or go beyond, exceed the local resources. There are different types of mass casualties. We have transportation casualties. We have human-caused terrorist attacks, natural disasters, which are floods, earthquakes, whatnot. And I think I'm done.
All right, thank you, Dale. That same question next, J.R. Alexander. Would you be prepared to handle a mass casualty incident? If so, what does your plan involve?
I would be prepared, and the first thing that I would do is I would contact a county that has a mass casualty trailer that have been prepared. Carbon County has a trailer that has been prepared for mass casualty that can hold up to 12 bodies. The National Security, I can't remember the name, but it has provided one semi-truck and trailer that can carry up to 40 bodies, and all of the counties in Wyoming have participated in buying a second semi-truck and trailer. So there are 2 of them. One is located in Cheyenne, one is located in Casper, which they both have drivers assigned to them. I would get those, depending on the size of the mass casualty, I would get one of those on their way, first thing, to get here. Now, many of the trainings and many of the associations and things that Dale is a member of, those things come while being coroner. The trainings, being members of those disaster programs, a lot of those are for law enforcement and the coroner. So those things will come in time as I become coroner. Now, my time is up.
All right, and a rebuttal perhaps, Dale Majhanovich?
Sure, as far as a mass casualty trailer, I probably one of the first in the state of Wyoming to require one. We do have one here in Sweetwater County. A little smaller in size, but it is a refrigerated trailer bought with Homeland Security money, so we have something available here. I was also responsible with the aid and help of the commissioners and also the hospital to increase the load at the hospital as far as storage, in case we do have a mass casualty. We went from a 6-person storage facility to approximately, we can probably handle 30 to 50 deceased individuals at this time.
Very good. And any closing thoughts, J.R. Alexander?
When asked if he would be prepared for it, he made no mention of a mass casualty vehicle that could take that. That's the most important thing. We have to get prepared for the bodies, okay? As far as being involved in things in the county, approximately 10 years ago, the county had a drill, a mass casualty drill, where Mr. Majhanovich was invited to participate there, and he did not show up. Now, whether he was on a call or what was going on, no one knew. No one was notified of why he didn't show up. And where a different funeral home director had to take on the responsibility of being the coroner for that drill for the county.
All right, very good. And that will close out that topic, at least in some respect. We will be talking a little bit further about mass casualties. And actually, J.R. Alexander, the question will go to you first. And with the question, Deb Sutton.
We are going to dig just a little deeper into this subject, gentlemen. As coroner, how would you handle a case of Ebola or another contagious disease? Let's say the deceased is in the hospital. Think Texas.
At the present time, the government is coming out with different procedures to handle these types of situations. Enough information has not yet been put out on how to handle these situations. But going on what I know now and how I would handle the situation is I would, if it were to be at the hospital, is as much as possible is to evacuate as much as possible from the hospital. The people on different floors, and the floor and the area where people could have been affected, then that area would be quarantined, and calls would be made to government agencies regarding this disease, because right now it is so unknown and we do not have any procedures or protocol put in place on how to handle this type of outbreak.
All right, thank you, sir. Once again, as coroner, how would you handle a case of Ebola or another contagious disease? Let's say the deceased is at the hospital, and your response, Dale Majhanovich.
Well, that's pretty easy. If I already knew the victim had Ebola or disease, I'm sure the hospital would be for quarantine, and I would get advice from state, federal, or local and federal officials on how to handle the body. Basically, there would be no attempt on my part until I was cleared to handle it. The problem that I see with the coroner's office right now at this present time is going to out-of-hospital situation. I hope I can go there. If we go on a fatality, for instance, it is very vital at this time that the coroner actually receives information on where the victim has been, even a brief medical history, just so you can protect yourself. Put on your protective personal equipment, glove up, and do the best you can. But there again, history is vital. At this time, pathologists, actually the ones I'm using right now, they will not accept individuals until I receive that information. Fortunately, with Ebola, as we see it, it looks like I saw yesterday that 40-some people were let out. So hopefully it is getting contained. So, but you still have to take those precautions. Thank you.
All right, very good. And perhaps a rebuttal, J.R. Alexander.
If a disease or outbreak came like that, the coroner is only notified in time of death. Okay, and in a hospital, almost all the deaths that are coroner cases are in the emergency room and not elsewhere in the hospital, unless a surgeon wants the coroner in on a certain case to discover a certain thing. Okay, but most everyone else in the hospital rooms are under the care of a surgeon, and therefore they're not coroner cases.
All right, thank you so much, and back to Dale Majhanovich.
Well, like I say, my statement still stands as far as the quarantine, that as far as coroner's cases. Many coroner's cases end up in the emergency room or come through the emergency room, but not all coroner's cases are strictly from surgery. A coroner's case, like I say earlier, can be an accident, suicide, homicide, whatnot. We do have victims of homicides made it up, or 10 potential homicides made it up on medical floor, surgical floor, accident victims that died 2-3 later from a broken kneecap. We've had that before. So it's not all strictly maintained in the emergency room or in surgery.
All right, very good, sir. And Dale, you'll actually respond first to our next series of questions.
Can the coroner be held liable for ordering an autopsy if the family does not want one? If so, who is responsible for that charge?
Well, the answer to that one is pretty easy. The answer is no. The coroner cannot be held liable. The only time a family would become responsible for an autopsy or the charges is if during the investigation the coroner actually has an individual and he knows the answers to his questions, date, time, cause, and manner of death. If the family's insistent and wants the autopsy and the coroner has these answers already, which is required by statute to have, and sometimes it is required by the families themselves, if they want an autopsy, to pay those expenses. Very rarely does it happen, but it does happen.
All right, very good. And once again, the question will now pose to J.R. Alexander. Can the coroner be held liable for ordering an autopsy if the family does not want one? If so, who is responsible for the charge?
I agree with Mr. Majhanovich. No, the coroner cannot be held responsible. On all autopsies, the coroner is the one who orders them. It is a good idea to order an autopsy if there is a chance for litigation to protect the county. There are times when the family does want an autopsy, when it is not necessarily a requirement, that they have to pay for it. But anytime there is a homicide or some type of police investigation involved, there is normally an autopsy done. Those autopsies are paid for by the county.
All right, very good, sir. A rebuttal, perhaps? Dale Majhanovich.
I think we fairly well covered it. The only reason is the generality of an autopsy. Autopsy are basically held any time we have any question dealing with, it's not just homicide or litigation. If we have questions just basically the cause of death, we have to have an autopsy to determine the cause, or you don't know it. Thank you.
Very good, sir. Any closing thoughts, J.R. Alexander?
According to the state statutes, even before an autopsy is ordered, if the coroner has any doubt or any question about the cause of death, the state statutes do say that the coroner should obtain or can obtain information from any licensed medical professional, a doctor, to discover cause of death before an autopsy needs to be ordered. Sometimes that can be done before an autopsy is ordered to save from the county paying for that. The coroner should direct every autopsy. The coroner should go with everybody that does go for autopsy. That does not happen at the current time, but it should happen.
All right, very good. And ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, let me remind you once again, if you've got any questions you'd like to be posed to the candidates this evening, if you haven't done so already, please feel free to write them down. When they are written down, please feel free to raise your hand and somebody from the library will collect them and we will pose them to the candidates. Moving right along, I believe this is our last series of questions, and we'll pose this first to J.R. Alexander with the question once again, Deb Sutton.
If you have to go to a scene of a death where you perceive that the death occurred due to unnatural causes, what is your first responsibility?
This was covered a little bit before. The first responsibility in coming to any death is to meet with law enforcement on the outside of the scene. You're going to make sure that there's nothing there that can go into the scene to disturb any evidence or anything like that. you're gonna have a plan on what responsibilities are whose and what the duties are. And as I said, you work from the outside in. Those are basically what goes on with a death that is an unnatural death.
All right, very good. And same question once again, Dale Majhanovich.
Basically, a death from a natural cause is treated the same as any death you have. You still follow the same requirements as GR just stated. One thing we do, and I haven't brought out, is when we arrive at the scene of any call, we investigate as a homicide until proven otherwise. You have no idea whether it's an 80-year-old gal that's been suffering from an illness over years. Myself and investigators, we always treat everything as a homicide until proven otherwise. With that mindset, you will make sure you get proper pictures. There are no shortcuts. You don't take shortcuts. We investigate them all the same.
Very good, sir. Any thoughts in rebuttal? J.R. Alexander.
I agree with those comments. Every death is considered a homicide until proven otherwise.
Very good. Anything in closing, Dale Majhanovich?
I think closing statement or just
No,
closing question?
anything to close on that last series of
No, I
questions?
think we covered it.
Okay, very good, sir. Deb Sutton, anything else from you before we move along to questions from our audience?
Do we have many questions from the audience?
I have one here, and before we get to it, let me remind you once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you need pen or paper, please raise your hand. If you have a question ready to submit, again, please raise your hand as well.
I always have extra questions, but you guys should go ahead.
Well, very good. What I'd like to do is give the various people that have posed questions the opportunity to read the questions if you so choose. Jackson Waters, is that correct, sir? Would you care to read this question yourself, sir?
Go ahead. It's pretty straightforward.
All right. The question from Mr. Waters, and Deb, please let me know who will be fielding this first.
That'll be Dale Majhanovich.
All right. Dale, the question from Mr. Jackson is, how many deaths have you attended?
Boy, exact number? Thousands? Exact number, I have no idea. Like I said, I've been doing this since I've been a young cop at the age of 14, 15 years old, so I've attended thousands. Exact number, 2,000, 3,000, I have no idea. I have to study that and figure that one out.
Okay. Very good. Let me pose the same question to J.R. Alexander.
Maybe 10.
Okay. Sir, does that adequately answer your question, sir?
In 24 months as a CNA, is that 10?
Yes, sir.
I'd be worried. Sorry.
All right, do we have-
I take very good care of my patients. I check their vitals often. I do body checks on them often, and I report back to registered nurses for them to come and do inspections if anything is going on with those patients. In fact, in one client that I had, his blood pressure was extremely high. What I did is I reported it to the CNA or to the registered nurse. Actually, at the time, no nurse came out to do anything, to check anything. What I did is I got on the phone, called my father, who was a physician, retired, and told him the circumstances. He said, you need to get him as soon as possible. I loaded him up with his wheelchair into my pickup. I took him into the VA Medic Center and told them that he needed to be seen as soon as possible because at first they didn't want to see him for a couple weeks. I got him in on medication, and that saved his life.
Thank you.
Very good. Anything in closing on that same question, Dale
Not
Majhanovich?
at all.
All right, very good. And I've just been handed a question, and Lindsay, shall I be asking this, or? All right. Well, I tell you what, let me pose it to each individual candidate. And again, Deb, keep me on track, please.
J.R.
All
Alexander.
right, so this will go first to J.R. Alexander. Thank you so much. I'm going to read verbatim. Speaking of changes, what type of changes exactly are you talking about? And I would imagine this is regarding changes in the county coroner's office. How can you change the job and why? J.R. Alexander.
The first thing that needs to happen is things need to go by the book all the time on every case. Another thing that needs to happen, there's a conflict of interest. For many years now, the coroner's office has been located on the property of a private company. This is not appropriate. This is not proper. It's been worked out through the county commissioners for the coroner's office to remain on Vase property from the time that Pete Vase was coroner. This is not appropriate. It needs to be on county property. There needs to be a separate office than at a funeral home. That's another thing that needs to happen. The first thing I'm going to work on when I'm coroner is work on bringing a forensic pathologist to this county. We want to keep the money at home in the state. I've spoken with different counties around about the possibility of their input financially towards keeping a coroner here. If we had a coroner in the county, we would have other counties bringing their autopsies to us. It is better to keep the money in the state, or in the county, or at least in the state, than giving it outside to others. I have many contacts. I have 3 doctors in my immediate family, several cousins in different states, many contacts to locate a pathologist.
Very good. That is J.R. Alexander. And let me put this together, Dale Majhanovich, to you. We're talking about changes with J.R. Alexander. So let me ask you, what, in your opinion, needs to stay the same under your tenure as our county coroner? And also, if you care to, take this opportunity to address any questions or concerns that Mr. Alexander has just raised.
Well, actually, as far as the coroner's office, I think right now everything should stay the same. I think over 32 years, everything is running efficiently, and I deal with the commissioners daily on my budget. It's very low, if not the lowest, one of the lowest in the county. If there's any question, we have dealt with it. There's never really been a question that I can recollect. As far as the location of the office itself, well, I actually was the first coroner in Sweetwater County to take the coroner's office out of the funeral home. That's when I acquired vehicles from the county. That's why when I answer now, I answer my cell phone from the coroner's office. That's why everything comes through dispatch out of fairness to private enterprise. I did that 15 years ago. My office is not located at Vase Funeral Home. I don't know where you acquired that information. As far as a pathologist, his plans of bringing a forensic pathologist to Sweetwater County using his dad's connections. I'm getting short time here. First of all, this is not completely the coroner's decision. It'll be based on monies and that brought up by the commissioners, hospital, whatnot. Riverton has tried this year already. Their costs exceeded $200,000. The idea was dropped. It's just not feasible. Our populace and our demographic area here does not allow us to do so. I've been on the coroner's board for years and the coroner's office for 32 years. Talked about it numerous times, and it's just not happening right now.
All right, thank you, Dale Majhanovich, and getting some good exchange now. An opportunity to reply, J.R. Alexander.
It doesn't, because something hasn't worked out to a certain point, doesn't mean that it can never happen. I'm not saying that it's going to happen right away as soon as I take office, but it's something I'm going to work towards. Yes, it's an expensive feat with the county commissioners, with the hospital. I've spoken with Dr. Holland, who's a pathologist up at the hospital. That is something that I'm going to work towards doing because it would be beneficial. It is a high cost. That's why I mentioned bringing in other counties. I've spoken with other counties about this possibility of doing this. And yes, with those counties, they do say, yes, that's something we could look into and something that might be a possibility. I said I was going to work towards it. That's my goal.
Thank you. And closing thoughts on that same topic, Dale Majhanovich.
Well, I appreciate him, working towards it. I understand that. I wish it would happen. I wish we could have 2 of them here. But right now, the way the state of Wyoming is set up with our demographics and populace, it has been tried several times before. Like I said, they tried it again in Riverton this year. Another problem we have is getting a forensic pathologist here. If you have one, hey, he has to go on vacation. He might get sick. He might be testifying in the court of law. He might be elsewhere doing an autopsy versus here, because some of them do travel. What do you do then? Well, we go back to Colorado, like we do now.
All right, very good. That closes out the series of questions. Dale Majhanovich. Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions from the audience? If you have any, please feel free to raise your hand, and Miss Lindsay will come and grab them for you. Is fielding the next question?
Yes, it is.
There should not be a rebuttal here. But we have had a number of people that have openly wondered, there's been so much talk about the cost of a pathologist. So this will go to Dale Majhanovich. What is the cost in your estimates of bringing in a pathologist?
Well, as far as what I'm reading and looking at so far, and basically looking at pathologists per se, you pay for what you get. I mean, pathologists like no different than any other doctor. You might be able to pick one for $8,000, but you better do good recruiting and see what you're getting. For the average cost right now, as my understanding, is $250,000. That's just their salary. That's not including bringing them in here, recruiting them, whatever you have to do. Sometimes, I don't know, when you bring doctors in, you might pay off student loans, you might have to do this. That's just their salary input. As far as recovery, it depends on their cost, how much they charge you. Right now, the pathologist here in Rock Springs, and that's another issue I was bringing up. The pathologist here in Rock Springs charges $1,200 per case. Well, our forensic pathologist in Colorado that we use, understanding this, charges $1,040 to help us cover our costs of our gas and whatnot to go there. So basically, the charge is the same. But as far as a forensic pathologist coming here to recover that much money, how much business we get from other counties, that's been the problem. We have no idea. They might say they use you, they don't. If they can't get them, they'll go to Colorado. I mean, it's just, that's why Riverton at this time has dropped the whole idea again.
Very good. Let me pose that same question, whether or not you concur with Dale Majhanovich's estimate of cost of bringing a pathologist, and also roll into that, do you think it's feasible to bring in a pathologist here in Sweetwater County? J.R. Alexander.
I do concur with what he said. I am familiar with the process that what Riverton tried to do. And the pathologist that they did attempt to bring in was just over $200,000 salary. That is true. The cost of a pathologist is expensive. Once again, that's why I'm talking about bringing in other counties to contribute to that. Other counties have said, yes, that is a possibility. That is something we could look at and work towards. This is a process.
All right, thank you, J.R. Alexander. Without further questions from the audience, ladies and gentlemen, Deb Sutton, I believe we're ready for closing statements.
You are correct.
All right, that being the case, let's begin our closing statements with the incumbent, Dale Majhanovich.
Thank you. Serving as county coroner means facing unique professional challenges. It also requires equally unique skills and commitment in the area of utmost accountability and sensitivity to the needs of the community. Here I'd like to quote a legislator from Colorado named Gina Atkins, who said it best. Few things in our democracy are as important as ensuring that the citizens have confidence in their institutions in a crisis. For many individuals, the death of a loved one is just such a crisis. Ensuring that the proper steps and procedures are taken at the scene of that death to reassure family members that the death was a natural one, a suicide, or a homicide is a key element in maintaining citizen confidence in local officials. How local death investigators do their job is crucial to family members who are mourning a loss today and who may be seeking justice tomorrow. These are the overall challenges a coroner must meet. For me, it would be a privilege and an honor to be allowed to continue serving the people of Sweetwater County as your coroner and continue meeting those challenges. Again, thank you.
Thank you. That is Dale Majhanovich. And now closing statements, J.R. Alexander.
The facts I have presented this evening are just so. They are facts that I have received from legit people. I do have the abilities to fulfill the duties of this position. Most coroners do not have a great deal of experience when they start as coroners. Being an embalmer has nothing to do with being a coroner. A question was raised last night in Farson about the greatest achievement that we had achieved in our lifetime, aside from anything political. And I felt it appropriate to share tonight because the question was asked so that they could see and hear the kind of people we are. I had an unfortunate incident happen to me when I was 18 years old, 28 years ago. And at that time, I had an accident on a horse which put me in a coma. The prognosis was that I would not live through the night. When I did live through the night until the next day, the prognosis changed to that I would be a vegetable for the rest of my life. And I know there's some that think I'm pretty much a vegetable. But I have gone from learning to walk, learning to talk, learning to write. All those things came back pretty quickly. But my judgment, my ability to cope, my ability to think took some time. It was very discouraging for me. I went through a lot of depression. However, my father told me something that will never leave me. One day when I was discouraged, I said, I just want to give up. I just want to give up. And he said to me, okay, just do that. Okay, go ahead. Give up. Go ahead and give up. Now what? You're going to go to bed. You're going to wake up in the morning. You're faced with the same issues. I take that and to apply that to every aspect of my life. I'm sitting here today. I've achieved many great things because of my perseverance and my desire and my energy to learn and to grow and to achieve. In very short times, I have grown into management positions. I have grown to be one of the highest paid workers in my field today because of my desire and my ability to achieve and to grow. I commit to doing that as your Sweetwater County Coroner. I will do that, and I always will work on things to improve them in the coroner's office. A unexpected death is the most traumatic thing upon a family, and I will be there. I will bring in my team, my compassionate advocacy team. Look it up on my website. I have some good plans for the coroner's office. Thank you.
Thank you, J.R. Alexander. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to our friends also tuning in this evening on KRKK. Big thanks again to our friends here in the library and our friends that facilitate the goings-on of the library. And I believe we are back at it once again next Monday. Is that correct? All right, next Monday, that'll be our next series of candidate debates. I believe we've got 3 next week, so of course we'll catch all the action once again live on AM 1360 KRKK. I'm Johnny K. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen.